So we had our second round of the playoffs, 2 game ones yesterday, Bucks, Celtics, Warriors, Grizzlies. One game, obviously a lot better than the other, but some real concerns for both home teams in that one, both 2 seeds, the Celtics and the Grizzlies. It's weird. This is a weird situation because I'm more concerned for the team in which the game was closer. Grizzlies lose to the Warriors. Very end of the game, they have a chance to win. They lose by 1. I'm more concerned about Memphis than I am about Boston, which is weird because Boston, I guess you could say it's a blowout, right? Whenever you have both teams' benches in the game at the end of the game, it was a blowout. Close game, competitive game until the fourth quarter. Bucks went on a run. But I'm more concerned about the Grizzlies. And you go, well, how are you more concerned about the team that lost by 1 and not concerned about the home team that lost by 15 or whatever it was, right? They were down by 15 or 18 at one point of the game. How are you more concerned with that team? And I'll explain why. First, let's start with the Bucks and Celtics. I was picking Celtics before this series started, and this first game doesn't sway me to the Bucks. I picked the Celtics in 6. Does this sway me to maybe picking the Celtics in 7? Maybe a little bit. But that's the only thing it's swaying me to, saying, instead of the Celtics finishing off this is 6, maybe they finish it off in 7. And even then, I'm still not going to change my pick. I still believe Boston could get it done in 6. Yes, Milwaukee got game 1. Let's say Boston makes the adjustments. They get game 2. If Boston can go and steal the first one in Milwaukee, go up 2-1, even if Milwaukee ties it, I could see Boston coming back to home, going up 3-2, finishing off in Milwaukee. You see where I'm going with this. So I'm not going to jump off of myself. I'm definitely not jumping off of picking the Celtics in the series, but I may be leaning more towards the Celtics winning in 7 instead of 6. But even then, I'll stay with Boston in 6. Now, my concern with Boston is the rest of the team. Going into the series, I didn't pick Boston because I think Boston's just all around better than Milwaukee. I picked Boston because I thought Milwaukee had a very, very important piece to their puzzle out in Chris Middleton. And though you can win a game without your superstar, one of your superstars, obviously their superstar is Giannis. Let me make sure that you don't think I'm saying Chris Middleton is the guy. I'm not going to go on this Kendrick Perkins weirdness that he went last year saying Chris Middleton's Batman, Giannis is Robin. That we know was all cap and not the case. This series and the way the Bucks are, Chris Middleton is your Robin, and he's still an all-star. He's still a great player, great scorer, and a big piece of that puzzle, and I don't think that they can win the series without him. Can they win game 1? Can they win a game? Sure. But throughout a series, when you start seeing how the game's playing out, you start adjusting the game plan and changing it up, things can change. So because of that, I'm not jumping off the Celtics, but I do have some concerns. The concerns is what happens with the rest. We still have Giannis. We still have Drew Holiday. Those 2 guys are going to be the focal point for the Boston Celtics. Focal points for the Milwaukee Bucks, obviously Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. What happens with the rest of the guys? What are the others in the way Shaq says it, right? Calls them the others. What are the others doing in this series? Well, my concern for Boston has always been my concern for Boston, even going back last year and the previous year. Do they have enough depth? Do they have enough bucket getters on that team to where they can lighten the load of Tatum and Brown, especially considering that Tatum and Brown, the biggest question is how they fit together. Do they feed off of each other? We see Giannis and Drew, and they can play together. They can feed off of each other. You can have 2-man games with the 2 of them, forcing switches, forcing whoever's guarding Drew now to guard Giannis, forcing whoever's guarding Giannis now to guard Drew, and they can play off of that. With Tatum and Brown is different. Whoever's guarding Tatum can be a guy that can guard Brown and vice versa. So you can't use them in pick and pops, use them in pick and rolls, use them in high-low and switch situations. You can't use them in that way because they're both very similar. They both score in similar ways from the same positions on the court. They're both effective in the same positions on the court. So because of that, it becomes a lot of ISO ball for each one, where when you look at Milwaukee, the ball was swinging across the perimeter, getting shots, and they just had more from guys like Grayson Allen, from Pat Connaughton, Bobby Portis. They had multiple times where they just went to him. They just liked the matchup. They liked him over Grant Williams. They liked him over whoever was guarding him, and they just went to him in the post. A couple fadeaways, mid-range jumpers, started knocking down the 3. So it seems like they're getting more from the others, where you look at Boston's others, Marcus Smart, Al Horford, Derek White, Grant Williams. What are we going to get from those guys? Because in order to lighten up some of that just hounding defense, Bucks picking them up at full court for the majority of the game gave them a lot of issues. Because the Bucks know they don't have a true point guard. They don't have that guy. Drew Holiday, you can't really pick up at full court the way you can with Marcus Smart. Teams that have those true point guards, you can't go pick up the Suns at full court with Chris Paul. You can't go pick up these. You can't use that and be ultra effective in it because they have those true point guards who can split double teams, who have great handles, who don't turn the ball over. Instead, no, let's put the ball in Jaylen Brown's hand. Let's try to put it in Tatum's hand. Because even though those guys are superstars, they don't have the ball handling skills as a Chris Paul, as a John Morant, as a Kyrie Irving, as a Steph Curry. They're not point guards. They don't have those ball handling skills, so we can force them into turnovers if we make it ugly for them, and that's what the Bucks did, and that's what's concerning about the Boston Celtics. Now, they have to make adjustments to that, and I think they will. And all in all, I still have a hard time seeing Milwaukee winning this series without Chris Middleton. That's why I am a little concerned for the Celtics, but not so completely concerned where I'm jumping off of the Celtics ship and I'm jumping to the Bucks and saying they're going to win this series. It is concerning. It is concerning when I see Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown struggle that much, but you have to think that eventually in this series, those two guys are going to get hot. And if there's a game where they both get hot together, it's very difficult to beat that team, especially with the way they play defense. But again, picking them up at full court, forcing turnovers. The Celtics were very bad in transition defense. It seemed like they just wanted to send bodies to the paint to stop Giannis on those drives, and they allowed shots for Pat Connaughton, Grayson Allen, and even Drew Holiday in transition threes. Bobby Portis hit a couple transition threes. So the transition defense was definitely an issue. When you see them in half court, you see what we expected from these two teams, where both teams are going to have trouble scoring in a half court setting and in half court offense. It's going to be a struggle for both teams because the focal point of stopping Giannis getting to the rim, stopping Giannis from getting easy points in the paint, stopping Drew Holiday from getting into the paint and getting the spots he wants to get to. You saw that focal point. You saw it done well for the Celtics. It came in transition where the ball swinging, Boston scrambling, and they end up getting good-looking threes, and Milwaukee hit them. You also can't expect for the Grayson Allen, the Pat Connaughtons, and the Bobby Portis and all these guys to continue to knock down threes at that rate. Can they knock them down? Yes, and if they do, if those others continue to shoot this way throughout the series, and Boston's others like Marcus Smart and these guys continue to struggle throughout the series, then we're going to have some real issues. But I'm not ready to jump off of that bandwagon quite yet. I'm still rocking with Boston. I'll stay picking them in 6. It might swing me to picking them in 7. If they lose the next game, obviously, then you'll have to start doing some deeper thinking. But as of right now, I'm still picking Boston to win the series. I'll stick with them in 6. And that leads me to the Memphis Grizzlies and why I'm more concerned with Memphis in that game than I am with Boston. And again, you're going to say, well, how? Memphis had a great game. They only lost by 1. Boston got blown out. Yeah, I get that. But the adjustments that Boston has to make, I think they can make them. And I think they're still going to play great defense. I don't think Tatum and Brown are going to struggle from the field every game like they did. Where on Memphis' side, the issues I saw with Memphis in that Timberwolves series, 2 major issues. One, John Morant's inability to stretch the floor, his inconsistency from the three-point line. He was so bad in that series from the three-point line. I went, oh man, if all they have to do is guard John Morant inside the paint, if they don't have to jump out on him from the three-point line, if they're starting to give up some good-looking threes for Ja because he just can't hit them, that's going to be a long series against the Warriors, especially with the Warriors and their ability to play offense and their ability to score at a very high rate. It's going to be tough if John Morant can't stretch the floor. And number 2 was Jaren Jackson. In my opinion, Jaren Jackson has to be the second best player on the Grizzlies team. He has to be effective offensively. Not saying he has to score an X amount of points, but he has to put pressure on Draymond. He has to put pressure on these guys to guard him out to the three-point line. He has to find ways to get easy buckets. He has to run the floor. He has to get inside offensive rebounds. He has to get going. And in the Timberwolves series, he had a very, very tough series. He was shooting terrible from the field. He was constantly in foul trouble on defense, which he's a great defender, one of the best shot blockers in the league, but he was so aggressive defensively that he put himself in foul trouble, and it seemed like the frustrations defensively carried into the offense where he was starting to shoot poorly, low shooting percentages, wasn't really, he's not known as a post-up guy. He's not going to get in the post and really work it from that area, but he needs to be good. He needs to get it going in this series in order for them to have a shot. My concern is that both of those things happen. The two concerns for the Grizzlies were not a concern in this game. Ja Morant came out and knocked down his first 2 threes in the game. Ja Morant made more threes in this one game than he made in the entire Timberwolves series. Think about that. Ja Morant had the game we've been expecting him to have. Ja Morant answered my questions about him extending his game out to the three-point line, and he was consistent from there. I go, well, then the Warriors are in trouble, right? Jaren Jackson, 30-point game. Best game so far in the playoffs for Jaren Jackson. Warriors should be in trouble. Draymond Green gets ejected before halftime of that game. They have to play an entire half without Draymond. Let me remind you, he had 3 steals in the first half. He's their best rebounder on the team. Maybe Kevon Looney, but you get my point. He's their center for big portions of that game. So if he's out for an entire half, if he gets ejected and he's out the entire second half, Warriors are in trouble, right? So how'd the Warriors still win? Jaren Jackson plays great, has a career-high playoff points. Ja Morant hits from the three-point line consistently, has the best shooting game so far in his playoff career. Their best defender, the guy who plays center for them in that kind of death lineup that they call it, that really heavy offensive efficiency lineup for the Golden State Warriors, is ejected before halftime, and yet they still win. The Memphis Grizzlies still can't muster up enough points or do anything to slow down the hot offense of Steph Curry and Jordan Poole and Klay Thompson. So it becomes that scenario where you go, okay, even when we have the concerns not be a concern, we still lose to this team. And the reason I'm more concerned with Memphis is because I picked the Warriors in this series. I picked the Warriors in 6. So if I'm picking the Warriors in 6 and I go, well, the only thing that'll change my mind about picking the Warriors here is if Ja Morant starts hitting from the three-point line, if Jaren Jackson all of a sudden scores 30 points in the game, if Draymond Green gets kicked out, if that happens, then I won't pick then obviously the Warriors are going to lose the game. All those things happen, the Warriors still win. Yeah, I'm very concerned for Memphis' ability to win this series. Especially when Draymond's out, and if you're the Memphis Grizzlies, the thing that you have, the thing that every team should have against the Warriors is your size advantage. You should win the rebounding battle. So when Draymond Green's ejected from the game and the Warriors start winning, getting offensive rebounds, when Gary Payton at 6 threes coming in, tipping out missed free throws, getting offensive rebounds themselves, when they're getting putbacks and Kuminga and Looney and these guys are beating you on the boards, we got bigger issues. You got much bigger issues. The Warriors are not known as a physical team. They're a finesse team. And when they're out there being more physical than you, winning the offensive rebounding battle, we got bigger issues to worry about. So I don't know if Ja Morant's going to continue to shoot like that from the three-point line. I don't know if Jaren Jackson's going to continue to have 30-plus point games in the playoffs. But if those things weren't enough to win, what happens when they're not getting those things? Because we haven't seen enough that we think that that's going to continue. We haven't seen enough from Ja Morant in the first round of the Timberwolves. I think he's going to continue to shoot well. We haven't seen enough from Jaren Jackson since that first round to think that he's going to stay out of foul trouble and be very efficient on offense. We don't have those things to look at. So all in all, Celtics play physical, extremely physical, man. I saw guys on the floor, Tatum, Brown, Horford, Williams. Those guys, it looked like there was a part of that game where every single possession, there was a Boston Celtics player on the floor having to scrape themselves up and get back, having to scrape themselves off just to be able to secure rebounding position, just to be able to box out to secure rebound. Somebody ends up on the floor and then they have to get up and come back to set up their offense. Just such physical play from the Bucks, and we know that they're going to do that. We know what Lopez gives you down low. We know he's going to be physical. We know he's going to make it very difficult, and he was probably their biggest concern. I mean, for Tatum and Brown, you don't want them shooting that much from the perimeter. You want them getting into those spots and doing what they can, but when you have Portis, Lopez, Giannis all guarding that paint, like I said, you're going to need to find ways. You're going to have to find ways to swing the ball, catch and drive, force the help defense, and somehow swing it enough to where Brown and Tatum can end up with some open shots from the three-point line. Because when they did, and they did at times, they knocked him down. They looked good. Tatum looked like the superstar that he is. Brown struggled a little bit more, but they're more efficient there. When it gets tough is when that ball's not swinging, you're not forcing those rotations, you're not getting them into a scramble, and then all of a sudden Tatum and Brown are taking tough shots, or when they're driving and the Bucks' ability to defend at the rim without fouling is the issue. That's the biggest issue for Tatum and Brown, is the Milwaukee Bucks have an ability to play at the rim, protect the rim, and not send them to the line. Giannis can play hands up. Brook Lopez is so good at making sure he's not drawing unnecessary fouls, playing hands up. Bobby Portis, though at times he can get, he can foul a little bit. He's playing really good. So the ability of the Milwaukee Bucks to protect the paint, their physicality, how you play that physical without getting into foul trouble. And again, the reason I'm not concerned is the refs allowed this game to be very physical. The refs were not calling ticky-tack stuff in this game. So if the refs continue to allow it to be played like this, the Celtics have to adjust to it. But if that whistle starts, if they have a new crew, if for whatever reason the refs are going to be blowing that whistle a little bit more, then that changes the dynamic of how the Bucks can play. That changes how aggressive they can be in that full court press. That changes how aggressive they are protecting the rim, how aggressive they are going for offensive rebounds. The refs can dictate how the game is played as well. I hate the belief that the refs can dictate who wins a game. That drives me nuts. Yes, there's a bad call sometimes, and yeah, there might be a call that benefits the other team, and it might have given him the game in that very instant, in that very end. But throughout the entire game, no. Unless we're talking about Lakers, Kings, 2001, 2002, whatever year it was, where we know the refs were, doing everything they could to help the Lakers win. But since then, no, the game's going to be called the way the game's called. But what I'm saying is, if the game is called a little more ticky-tack, if they're not allowing the game to be as physical as this one, now the Bucks have to adjust to it. And if the Bucks have to adjust to a more finesse game, if the Bucks have to adjust to a game where they're not allowed to play as physical as they did in game one, then how does that swing how we think the game's going to go? Does that swing who has the advantage in those matchups? So a lot to still be proven for the Bucks. I'm not going to jump on their bandwagon just because they won game one of that series, but it was a huge win for Milwaukee. Let's not downplay it. The one thing I think in that series that it's going to show us, win or lose, in my opinion, whether the Bucks end up especially if the Bucks end up winning, if they end up beating the Celtics and moving on to the Eastern Conference Finals without Chris Middleton, especially. But even if they lose this series, the thing I think it's going to show us is that Giannis Antetokounmpo is undoubtedly the best player in the NBA today. If you don't already feel that way, many people already feel that this is the case. But if they can go in to Boston and win this series without Chris Middleton, somebody who by Kendrick Perkins was called the Batman in this team, somebody who is such an important piece of this puzzle. If they can win that series, and Giannis does the necessary things. Giannis didn't have a 40-point game. Giannis didn't go bananas. He wasn't very efficient from the field. He shot somewhere like 30-something%, somewhere around there for the game. He didn't go crazy, but he had a triple-double. He rebounded. He played great defense. He had 13 assists. He was the focal point. That's your job as a superstar, is to make them pay in whatever way they want you to. However they choose for you to make them pay, you make them pay. They want to corral you, double team you, triple team you, send all types of bodies at you to keep you off of the rim, to keep you out of the paint. What are you doing when they do that? Are you forcing shots? Are you allowing yourself to get frustrated? Are you complaining to the referees? Something that I saw Tatum doing quite a bit. Giannis wasn't doing that. Giannis was finding the open guy. Giannis was being patient. Let the double team come, fake out, watch him, right? If he comes back, we kick out. If he rushes back to his defender, now I go. And that alley-oop to himself off the glass, where he's kind of stuck, pivots, turns, throws it up off the backboard, dunks it off. Giannis did everything he was supposed to do. He was a superstar in that game with 20 points. He didn't need to score 40. He didn't need to score 50. My problem is that sometimes I believe that Tatum and Jaylen Brown could get into the mindset where they go, we got to score 30 to win this game. And is it because they're just not getting enough, or is it because they're not trusting enough? In this game, I felt like it was a little bit of both, but there was many moments where I saw Tatum and Brown forcing some shots that they should have kicked out. And it is tough when you're 1 for 6, when you're 1 for 8, when you're a combined 3 for 15, it is tough to say keep kicking the ball, keep swinging it, get it to the open guy. It is tough to do that because you just want to get going. And yeah, it's true. I don't think Tatum and Brown, I don't think the Celtics can win the series if Tatum and Brown are averaging 20 points a game. I do think that one of them has to go off. I do think that one of them has to get close to 30 in each game, but they're capable of doing it. They're very capable. So because of that, I'm not jumping off the Celtics. I still got the Celtics in 6 even, maybe in 7, but I'm going to stick with the Celtics in 6. Warriors, Grizzlies, I still got the Warriors in 6. I still think the Grizzlies are going to find a way to win 2 games, but it is concerning. It is concerning when all of those things went right for the Grizzlies. Everything that went wrong, well, not everything, but if you tell the Warriors you have to play without Draymond, we remember the finals, and if Draymond doesn't get ejected, if Draymond doesn't get suspended, they win the finals, right? That's how important Warriors feel about Draymond Green. That's how important Draymond Green is to this team, where they felt like they would have won a championship if not him being suspended for a game. Yet he missed an entire second half in the game that they were trailing, and they still end up winning. Very concerned with the Grizzlies. Tonight, 76ers, Heat. Joel Embiid, my heart is broken for him, man. I've been such a huge fan of Joel Embiid, especially this year. I felt like Joel Embiid took his responsibilities and just took his leadership to a new status. He's always been a monster, but now you see him this year, and I'm like, man, Joel Embiid has never been so aggressive and just wanted to be a beast. He's always wanted to be skilled. He's always been skilled. He can hit from the perimeter, the up and unders, the ability to score from the post, the fadeaways. It's all there. It's all there for Joel. But this year, specifically, I think he realized, hey, man, I'm bigger and stronger than everybody on this court. I can bully my way to 20 points. I'll skill my way to the other 10. But I can bully my way to 20 points. I can force myself to get to the free throw line. I can put pressure. I can wear down the defense. I can just be the biggest, most physical presence on the court at all times. And I think he realized that. And you see his communication and his leadership skills and his optimism each game, the confidence he has, the confidence he gives guys like Tobias Harris, like Tyrese Maxey, bringing in James Harden with open arms and allowing him to do his thing and being able to play off of James Harden. You want me to pop, you want me to roll, whatever you need me to do, I'm going to play off of you. It was a thing of beauty for Joel Embiid. And I was so interested in this matchup coming in. Bam Adebayo is no punk. That dude is going to guard Embiid with everything he has. He's going to make it tough for Joel at all times. How is Joel going to deal with Bam Adebayo? How is Joel going to deal with the defense that the Miami Heat can play? How is James Harden going to deal with it? How are they going to play together? Can James Harden do enough, and can he be the best version of himself? Which I'll explain a little bit, but why I don't think he can. But I was excited for this matchup nonetheless. So now that Joel Embiid is out, it sucks. It changes clearly. If I'm saying that Chris Middleton changed the way I thought about the Bucks' chances against the Celtics, for sure with Embiid out, I don't think that they could beat Miami. I don't see it. And that goes to what I was saying about Harden, right? If we go, well, maybe they can. Okay, well, what would they need? What would the Sixers need in order for them to win a series without Joel Embiid, especially against the number 1 seed Miami Heat, who have probably the deepest team left in the playoffs? Maybe the Suns. The Warriors are pretty deep themselves, but Miami they're deep, man, especially if Victor Oladipo starts getting a little bit more minutes and he starts providing a little bit of a pop for them as well off the bench. Duncan Robinson, Tyler Hero. We don't know with Kyle Lowry and Jimmy Butler, but if those guys are good to go and they are good to go moving forward, Adebayo, they just have so many guys on that team that can get you a buckets. What I talked about from the Celtics, right? Do you have enough other guys to get you buckets? The Heat have a bunch of them. And they stay committed defensively. Duncan Robinson, who's a guy who you would think would be such a hindrance and on the defensive end, who would be that guy that you take advantage of, he's committed, man. And though he's not a great defender, doesn't have the best of footwork, not the most athletic guy, he's just committed. He's mentally locked into what they want to do on defense, and they make it extremely hard for everybody. So without Embiid, what do the Sixers do? Well, James Harden needs to turn back time. He needs to become the James Harden of the Houston Rockets, and it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen because you could just watch him. His inability to get past defenders, his inability to have that explosion, his handle is still one of the best, man. But the thing with James Harden that made him great was his handle, the step back, and then the explosion. The handle, baiting you into where he wants to get your body position, and then getting past you with a little bit of speed, a little bit of a bump, a little bit of power, and now you see that first step just isn't as quick anymore. He has a lot of trouble getting past that defender, and depending on who's guarding him in that Heat series, it's going to be tough for him. Tyler Hero's no chump. He ain't easy to get past. He's not easy to work on, It's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. But that's what the 76ers need. I don't believe that James Harden's there anymore in his career. I do feel like he's lost a step. I do feel like he's lost some of that explosion. He would have to have great shooting nights. Tobias Harris would have to be the guy, where Tobias Harris has taken a back seat since James Harden has joined. Tobias Harris was a guy who needed to be the second best scorer on that team for such a long time. When Harden came in, Harris took a step back, which I think was pretty good for Tobias. I don't know if Tobias is that prolific of a scorer to be the second best scorer on a championship team. Not saying he's incapable. I'm not saying he's not a good scorer, but to be the second best scorer on a championship team, think about who those guys have been. Klay Thompson, Steph Curry, when Durant was there, Kyrie Irving with LeBron James, Chris Middleton with the Bucks. It's different. It's different, right? Those guys, we feel a little bit more prolific of scorers than Tobias Harris. But in this case, Harden needs to turn back the clock, and Tobias has to give the best playoff performances of his career. If they can do that, maybe they have a chance. They can push the Heat. Maybe they steal a couple of games. Maybe, if they can do that. But with the way the Heat stay committed defensively, especially if Jimmy Butler and Kyle Lowry are good to go, which I'm assuming that they are. They took some time off. They weren't able to play in the closeout games, which was very important. The way they were able to close out the Hawks without those two guys in the starting lineup, without those guys, period, not only the starting lineup, they were both out completely for the games. To close out a game, that just shows you the depth. Closeout game without Kyle Lowry and Jimmy Butler, and they still close it out. They still beat the Atlanta Hawks. Says a lot about how deep this team is and how they play as a team. Eric Spoelstra continues to get the praise that he deserves. This guy is the real deal, man. Spoelstra knows what he's doing. And I had some concerns. If you go back, I had some concerns with how they were going into the playoffs because they were on a little bit of a losing streak. Things weren't looking so great, right? Towards the end of the season, when you need to play great, they started losing some games. Boston started creeping up on them. And I said, the issue with Jimmy Butler and Spoelstra where they're going at it, I'm like, oh, whoa, this is terrible timing. But that's a credit to Eric Spoelstra. You see them now, and there doesn't seem to be any issues. You look at Jimmy Butler's performances against the Hawks. He had the 40-plus, was it a 50-point game? Lit him up. The trust is there. Spoelstra trusts Jimmy Butler to do his thing. And they trust each other in the ball swings, and they get the ball to the guys that they set plays for. Duncan Robinson, Bam Adebayo's plays that Draymond Green role at the top of the key where he's, getting passes out and they're setting back screens for each other. Butler's getting the ball where he's comfortable with in those wing areas in the post. Backdoor cuts. Kyle Lowry has freedom to be the point guard and he sets things up and he pushes the tempo. They're a great team. There's a reason why they're number one in the East. Am I picking them to go to the finals? Am I picking them to win the finals? We're going to hold up on all that. But I can't see the Sixers beating them without Joel Embiid. Mavs Suns also tonight. And that'll finish up game one for round two of the playoffs. Mavericks, Suns, unbelievable job that Mavericks did in that first round, beating Utah, especially being able to beat them for the first few games. I think they won 2 games without Luka Doncic. That speaks volumes. I did not think there was any way without Luka that the Mavericks would be able to get past the Jazz. Obviously, Luka comes back, lights them the F up. Luka that's a bad man. Listen, I said Giannis in this series will show undoubtedly that he's the best player in the NBA today. Luka in this series can make people talk about him being the second best player in the NBA today. This is what Luka can do in this series. I don't know if they have enough to beat the Suns, especially if Devin Booker's good to go, which he seems good. Chris Paul seems to still be. Every year we have this discussion, right? Can Chris Paul stay healthy? Can he make it through the playoffs? If he can make it through a playoff series, if he can make it through the entire playoff run, any team he's on has a chance. We said that with, going back. I mean, the Clippers, he was pretty healthy, but even after that, when he was with the Rockets with James Harden, it was like, God, if he just doesn't get hurt. We always have the scenario last year when he missed games and he was playing injured. if Chris Paul can stay healthy in this series, if Chris Paul can stay healthy throughout the playoffs with Devin Booker back and the way this Suns team plays, DeAndre Ayton is such a big factor of that team. I don't think the Mavs have enough, but this could be a series where Luka Doncic shows that he might be the second best player in the NBA today if Giannis is number one. And going to the Utah Jazz, embarrassment, man. It's over. Blow it up. I don't know what you do. Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert continue to. It seems like Donovan Mitchell and him have not been able to get along. I would say Kobe and Shaq. The difference is Kobe and Shaq were winning. The difference is that Shaq was undoubtedly the best big man in the league. So if you're Rudy Gobert, you don't really have that. The difference is Kobe Bryant was on his way to becoming the Kobe Bryant. Donovan Mitchell, not so much. Even though Donovan Mitchell's a great player, but what do? Do you move Mitchell? Do you allow him to move on and send him somewhere else where you're going to get back a much bigger value than if you trade Gobert, where if you keep Gobert, the money that they paid him I thought was a bad move to begin with. He is a great defensive player. He does provide so much for you inside of the paint. But there are games where he was finishing sub 10 rebounds, 7 rebounds in one of those games where I'm like, you can't. Listen, man, if you're not a post-up guy, if Rudy Gobert is not the type of guy that can stretch the floor, nor is he a guy that you can give it to in the post and force double teams because he's just bigger, stronger, and poses his will the way Embiid can, the way Jokic can, the way these guys can. You can't pay him like you pay Jokic and Embiid and these guys. And they did. And I felt like that was a big mistake then, and I feel like it's still a mistake to keep him. So what do? You have to make some changes. Gobert has to leave. You have to blow this team up and try to find a different way to build around Donovan Mitchell, or is the relationship with Donovan Mitchell and this team so fractured that Mitchell's like, hey, don't worry about getting rid of Gobert. Don't worry about trying to rebuild for me. I want out. And then you trade him, and you'll get more back for Mitchell than you'll get for Rudy Gobert, but now you're starting from ground zero. Now you are truly rebuilding this team, and Utah, I'm going to come out bold statement, Utah won't be in the playoffs next year. I said it. It's hard to imagine because they've been a pretty consistent team in the playoffs for the last few years. What is it, 3-4 years straight that they made the playoffs? I don't have them making the playoffs next year. I just think that they're going to have to blow this team up, and whichever way they do, I think it's going to take some rebuild time, whether they rebuild around Donovan Mitchell, and Donovan Mitchell might be good enough to still get them to a play-in game, still might be good enough to get them to the playoffs, maybe. But if they have to trade Mitchell away, maybe that leads them to trading both. Maybe that leads them to going to complete rebuild. I think they're going to be a few years away from a team good enough to get back to the playoffs. So tough for the Jazz. A few other points that I wanted to make, a few other topics that I want to talk about from the playoffs was the two guys in particular that are getting probably more heat than anybody throughout this playoff time. Ben Simmons, Zion Williamson. I'll start with Ben Simmons because he's kind of the guy who is, I mean, it's hard not to say that he's the most hated player in the NBA today. I mean, I have never seen guys like Reggie Miller. Stephen A. Smith's a different story. He kind of goes off on everybody. But Stephen A. Smith, Reggie Miller, Charles Barkley, everybody's just ragging on Ben Simmons. And I never understood what was happening with Ben. When Ben came back, when he got traded, right, from Philly, when he got traded to Brooklyn, I thought it was going to be similar to what we saw with James Harden. Both guys are out. Both guys are injured. Ben Simmons was mental health issues, right? He wasn't ready mentally to come back. And then it was reported that he's also not ready physically. And I was like, wait, I didn't know that Ben Simmons had some year-long injury. When there's a year-long injury, we see it and we go, oh, damn, that's terrible. He's going to be out for a very, very long time. We didn't see that from Ben Simmons. So all of a sudden, he hears that he's had an injury that's sidelined him for an entire season. Well, it's the mental health issues, and it's the injury, and it's both, and it's... What are we doing, man? The way guys were ragging on him, calling him a quitter, saying that he quits on every team he plays for. He just doesn't have the heart, doesn't have the passion. It sucks to see because I think Ben Simmons can provide so much of what is needed from that Brooklyn team. He provides a guy that you can have defend whoever the best player is. He's that good defensively. You get another guy who can rebound and push the tempo off the rebound, hit Seth Curry. I almost said Steph. Jesus, imagine that team with Steph. Hit Seth Curry, hit Kyrie Irving, hit KD on breaks in transition. That's what Ben Simmons excels at. Get to the rim, finish at the rim. That's what Ben Simmons excels at, and that's, I think, what Brooklyn is missing. I thought this was going to be a perfect marriage in the same way I thought Harden was such a better fit with Embiid than Simmons was. I thought Ben Simmons was such a better fit for the Nets than Harden was. I thought this was going to be so beautiful, and I thought he was going to do exactly what James Harden did, which is, hey, I healed, guys. I got traded, and all of a sudden, I'm good to go. And I'm good to play big minutes and do all these things. I thought that's what was going to happen. So when I saw it didn't happen when he got traded, I was like, is there more to this? Is he really hurt? I thought this was one of those I'm hurt things. Is he really that injured? And as we got closer to the playoffs, I was like, okay, any day now, he's going to start playing with the team. Hey, 5 games out, 4 games out, he's probably going to start getting minutes with the Nets and then start increasing those minutes, so when we get to the playoffs, they can have him for at least 20, 25 minutes a game. All of a sudden he gets to the playoffs and, well, he's not playing? His back's still messed up? But when is his back good to go? Oh, he might be able to go game 3. Okay. I don't know how a back injury sidelined you for a year, but all of a sudden you can't play game 2, you can play game 3. All right. Well, no, he still has some back soreness, so possibly game 4. Okay, well, they're down 0-3. If he comes back, it wasn't like I thought if Ben Simmons gets there, they win the series, because we don't know what Ben Simmons looks like with them, right? Me thinking of this in my head and on paper is just, it's all irrelevant to what actually happens when he's there. But shit, you're down 0-3. You need something. And Ben Simmons is something. A very, very highly paid something. So here we go, Ben Simmons. Let's get it going. All of a sudden, well, the back's still a little bit sore, but it's still mental issues. He's not mentally prepared to come back. So then what are we doing? If you're not mentally prepared, then retire from the game. Listen, I am somebody who's always, I'm never the type of person where, you get paid way too much to have any type of mental illness. You get paid too much to have any feelings, any emotions, any thoughts. You get paid too much for that. I'm never that type of guy. I understand mental illness. I understand when people struggle and go through things. You may need some time off. You may need to seek help. But you can't seek help and then you're injured and you might come back and you might not come back and you're ready to come back and you just step away completely. Basketball is not a priority of mine. I can't play basketball right now, guys. It's not a priority of mine. I have a lot of real deep-seated issues. The type of depression that I'm dealing with and things that I'm dealing with are just, it's too much for me to care and focus about basketball right now while I'm going through these things. Hey, nobody's going to say anything about you. Don't worry about Ben. He's gone. He's dealing with his own stuff. I hope he gets better. But that wasn't what happened. It was always that, he's in Brooklyn. He's always dressed nice and there on the sideline. And it's almost like a teaser of when he's going to come back or not. If it's that serious and you inform the team, I'm going to be gone, man. I'm not going to be here. Hopefully I'm where I need to be in my place to be here next year, but you guys aren't going to have me this year. Nobody's going to have me this year. But he didn't do that. It was a constant wonder of when he's going to come back and how good he's going to be when he gets back with this team. So I don't want to crap on Ben Simmons too much. I don't want to sound like I'm just a big time Ben Simmons hater and I think he's a quitter. I'm not going to call him all of those things, but Ben Simmons, I feel like, could have done things very, very differently. And because he didn't, I understand the hatred of him. And, well, not the hatred, but I understand why people would be so critical of Ben Simmons in these moments. And at the end of the day as well, you still have an obligation to next season. And what happens next season? You do have to wonder, how committed is Ben Simmons to playing basketball? How much does he truly love the game? Because we haven't seen it from him. We have seen him quit on Philly. We've seen him allow the pressure and the opinions of the outside world affect him just in a way that I don't think I've ever seen anybody affected by that. What's up, little fruit fly? I've never seen anybody affected that way, to have Ben Simmons just completely shut down. I mean, it was almost like the outside world sidelined him for an entire season. I've never seen that. I've heard of DeMar DeRozan having to go through these mental health issues and Kevin Love having to seek help. They played through it. They still played. And in a way, they were like, playing was almost a relief for us. And it was those moments where we can kind of be in the moment and forget about things, but it affected our performance and we had to go seek help and we had to go through these things. It's there. You can take the advantage of it. So, I don't know, man. I don't know if you're Brooklyn, how you feel moving forward. I don't know if you can, you know, do we do another season? If Kyrie missed a bunch of these games because of the pandemic, well, not the pandemic, but he missed these games because of Brooklyn's, they weren't allowing him to play home games. Do you feel like he's going to give you, 70 plus games next season? Do you feel like he's going to build that chemistry with KD? Do we trust Ben Simmons to be all in and focus and play? So many questions for Brooklyn that need answers, and I don't know if they don't get the answers, what happens for them moving forward? Do you move on from Kyrie? Do you say we don't even want to test the waters anymore with Ben Simmons and move on from him? Where do we go for Brooklyn? You're talking about the team who was favored coming into the season to win the whole thing, with James Harden, favored to win it even after the trade with Ben Simmons. Now all of a sudden they get swept in the first round, and we have so many questions on whether Kyrie or Ben Simmons are even going to be on the team, let alone how many games are either one of them going to play. And that caused so much rift and the trickle effect to KD, to Kevin Durant. All of a sudden Kevin Durant's looked at as, you're not the best player, man. You're not the person that we thought you were. You were, you had such a luxury playing with Golden State that now you're in Brooklyn and you have to be the man. You have to kind of weather the storm. You have to carry the team. You can't do it. And listen, I understand, man. That's a tough Boston defense. The number one defense in the league, especially over that stretch where they pushed themselves from whatever it was, 8th seed, 7th seed, and pushed themselves all the way to the number 2 record in the East. When they pushed themselves there, they were the best defensive team in the league, and they showed it. And they made things so difficult on KD. And yes, I get it. If you're like, hey, he's still a superstar, he should have played better, I agree. Did KD help his case to say why he's still one of the best, if not the best player in the league? No, he did not. He struggled. He allowed them to get him out of his game. He played some of the worst games we've ever seen him play in the playoffs. So it hurt him, but damn. You didn't have KD, you didn't have Kyrie for any home games till the end of the season. You didn't have James Harden for a big portion. You had to go through the James Harden issue. You get Ben Simmons. You never even play with him. He had to carry so much load, and yeah, he could have had better games. He could have played better, but in this weird time, I am actually very sympathetic for Kevin Durant. And I never thought I'd say that. I thought Kevin Durant, the move that he made to Golden State, I thought it kind of ruined basketball for a little bit. So for me to sit here and be sympathetic for him, to have that, sympathy for him, to say, like, damn, dude, these guys are leaving him out to dry. And then Zion, I thought Zion was doing all of this because he just needed out of New Orleans. I thought he was doing this because he looked at the team and thought that it just wasn't good enough. They can't win. And it was hard for him to be responsible enough on his body to be as committed to his athleticism, committed to the diet, committed to keeping himself, and not only keeping himself in shape, but reaching new heights of that physical form, the way guys like Giannis have, the way guys like LeBron have, the way guys like Kobe did and Jordan did, and all of the greats. All of the greats go into the league pretty athletic and become more athletic. Go into the league pretty strong, become stronger, and they take diet and they take just the professionalism of basketball more serious. They start treating, it's going to sound corny, but they start treating their body like a temple. And trust me, someone who doesn't, I understand how easy it is to not. But when you're Zion and you go, okay, if you're committed to being the best player in the NBA, which I think is what your expectations are when you're number 1 draft pick, and you've had more hype than anybody. You had more hype than Kevin Durant. Nobody had more hype than Zion besides LeBron James coming out of high school. Nobody had more hype than Zion. So when Zion comes into the league, you would think that, okay, at this moment where you're at in your career, your expectations should be to be the very best player in the NBA. And when you see him gain the weight, and you see him come in overweight, and you see all those things happen, you go, how committed are you to it? So I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt, and I'm going to say that you're just not committed to the team. And maybe you're a type of guy that needs to be committed to a team in order to be committed to yourself, which then in turn, I just can't see you becoming the best player in the NBA if that's your outlook, if that's your approach. Jordan wouldn't care whatever team he got drafted by. Kobe wouldn't have cared whatever team he got drafted by. LeBron got drafted to the Cleveland Cavaliers. And those guys, body transformation. Giannis got drafted by the Milwaukee Bucks. And those guys, their commitment to their body, their strength and physicality and endurance and speed and quickness, all of those things got better being drafted by these teams. And they wouldn't have cared what team drafted them. They were going to be the best no matter what. No matter what. So when Zion, you go, man, I don't like that he doesn't have that type of mentality. So maybe he just wants out of New Orleans. Okay. Then all of a sudden you see him say now, oh, I'm really excited to sign an extension. I'm committed to New Orleans. Well, shit, how committed to them are you? And I understand he had the injury and, he can't run and he can't do that stuff, but he can diet. He can make sure that he doesn't put on enough weight to strain it even more. He can make himself easier on the recovery, easier on the rehab. It can make it easier on the physical therapy if he loses weight or just maintains the weight he's at instead of putting on whatever it was. You tell me he puts on 40, 50 pounds, it looks like he did. So I don't know where they go with Zion. I would love nothing more than to see Zion be committed. If he comes back next season in the best shape that he's ever been in, then watch out for the Pelicans because Ingram and CJ McCollum look like they're ready to go. They just need Zion to come along with them. They need Zion to be Zion. Be that dude, be that beast, be that guy. And all of a sudden, that team looks pretty damn good. Imagine if Zion's one of the top 5, top 10 players in the league. When healthy and when in shape and when in everything. When he has that Mamba mentality. Damn, that team's scary. And I think Zion's can, hopefully this means that Zion's realized it and is like, I can't wait to get into shape and get ready to go. I cannot wait. I hope that's what's going on because I want nothing more. Trust me, I love Zion, man. I want nothing more for him to come in and dominate the league the way we all thought he might be able to do. So to see the weight gain and the constant setbacks for the foot and all that is tough to see. Over the weekend, we also had, it's Monday, MMA Mondays. I hate when people are like, oh, the card sucks. It's a free fight night, but it wasn't a great card. I just want to talk about the main event a little bit before moving on and wrapping it up. Chito, Vera, Rob Font, I thought was going to be a really good fight coming into. I thought it was very interesting. I didn't expect his fight to go to the ground, and I was right in that scenario. Chito is a black belt. He's good with jiu-jitsu. Pretty decent takedowns, but it just isn't something that he looks for. It's something that if it kind of comes his way, he'll do it. But I thought this was going to be a stand-up battle, and I was very interested to see that very technical boxer, high rate, a lot of strikes thrown. Rob Font, the way he gets in people's faces and the jab and the constant punch rate that he's puts out and that very, technical boxing style versus Chito's real Muay Thai style. High, kind of on that back leg, high guard, kind of lets you throw shots and hopefully he can block them all with that really high tight guard. Crazy power in the leg kicks or kicks in general. He could throw them up high. They're not telegraphed. He throws them fast. He throws them hard, man. You heard a lot of the shots to the body of Rob Fonchers. It sounded like a fucking baseball bat. Kicks to the leg. He can hit all 3 levels, and he switches up all 3 levels. Beautiful. So I was really interested to see how that style was going to work. And in the first couple rounds, Chito's one of those weird guys where a 5-round fight benefits him way more than a 3-round. And it's not because of his rate and not because his cardio is just at a level that nobody else's is. Like, oh, his cardio is just so insane. It's not like Colby, right? Colby Covington, the reason why it benefits him in a 5-round fight is because he can keep a high pace over the course of 5 rounds that people just cannot keep. Every single fight besides Kamaru Usman, every single person that Colby fights, you see it. If it gets to round 4, if it gets even towards round 3, you already see them like, oh man, I got 2 more rounds of this shit. And you see them wilt, and Colby just doesn't. Chito's not really that guy. His cardio looks great. Don't get me wrong, cardio looks great. But Rob Font had a much higher output than Chito. Chito was just a lot more effective. But Chito's very, I compare him a lot to Peorion, right? Former 135-pound champion, just lost to Aljamain Sterling. That's who I compare Chito's style to. high guard, and hey, I will give you the first round. I'll give it to you. I just want to see what you got. I just want to see what you're throwing at me, what you're trying to set up. I just want to see it. I'll touch you a little bit. I'll touch the legs. I'll throw my kicks. I'll do my thing. But I'll give you the first round. Second round, I'll maybe pick up the pace a little bit towards the end of the round. But he was very methodical. End of second round, end of the third round. It wasn't until like 2 minutes or less, a minute left in the round, where he starts pouring it on. Now, okay, now I'm attacking. Now I'm offensive. Because in the first round, I was like, listen, I know what Chito's doing. I know his style. I've seen this with Piotr Jan too. But he can't give up rounds. It could be a Piotr Jan, Aljamain Sterling situation. You cannot give up rounds. You can't let them just jump ahead in the second round. Hey, you can't just let them jump ahead. You can't let Rob Font just win the round like this. And then the end of second round, now you're attacking. Now you're offensive. And when he opens up and attacks, man, he was hitting Rob with some shots. Rob looked damn near unrecognizable at the end of the fight. Just a bloody mess. Chito's jab was really impressive, how good his jab was and how that was working. Just the whole mix-up of it. Rob, credit to him. The other thing that I thought was weird was I felt like Chito in 2 times in that fight had a real opportunity to stop him and just didn't. He just, for whatever reason, maybe he didn't want to wear himself out. Maybe he just wasn't really threatened by Rob. Maybe he felt like, I have this fight won. If I just continue my composure and just keep doing what I'm doing, this guy just cannot beat me. So why risk looking for a finish and, do something dumb or empty the gas tank? But I really felt like in 2 spots, the end of round 3 and 4 maybe, or the 2 and 3, I forget exactly which rounds, but towards the end of those rounds, he had a real chance to finish Rob because he hurt him, dropped him, had him down, had him hurt, and just was very patient. At one point, drops him and just stands over him for damn near 45 seconds, just standing over him. It's like little kicks and feints, and maybe I'll jump in guard. I don't know why he was so scared to get into Rob Font's guard. I really don't. Maybe Rob Font's just so much better, with grappling, and he's a better jiu-jitsu player, I guess, than I thought. But I don't know. I mean, Chito's pretty good on the ground. He's a legit black belt. So I'm confused on why he was so tentative to get into the guard of Rob Font. I wouldn't expect that, but he didn't want to do it. And shout out to Chito, man. I think he won that fight. I saw a few people saying that Rob Font won. I don't know how. Guys, I like the scoring system. Sometimes people get upset by it. I don't care if Rob Font landed more shots. I don't care that Rob Font finished with more significant strikes, or which rounds he landed with more significant strikes. And 3 out of the 5 rounds, Rob Font had a lot more significant strikes than Chito. I don't care, guys. I love it when damage means more than anything. I love it when damage is the number 1 priority per round. And if neither one of those guys do much of damage, then yeah. Who was pressuring, who was more active, who was more offensive, who was more efficient, those things matter after we can't determine that any one of these guys did damage. So that's why you give Rob Font the first round. That's why Rob Font was winning the second round until Chito dropped him, until Chito rocked him, until Chito split him open, until Chito had his eye busted. Once you start busting dudes up, I'm not saying blood equals damage. We don't know that. But the shots Chito was landing were so much more impactful. How many times did Chito hit the deck because of something Rob hit him with? How many times did Rob hit the deck because Chito hit him with something? When that happens in a round, that round is now Chito's. I don't care if you landed 15 shots unanswered. When I land 2 and they drop you and I have a chance to finish you and it looks like you are severely hurt, I win the round. It's that simple. I love it when damage is the number 1 thing, because in a fight, it's who's landing the more damage. It's not who's slicker and who's more crisp and who put out the most damage. If we can clearly tell in a round, then that's who wins the round. If not, then it goes to the other stuff. So I thought Chito won it very easily. I had it scored 4-1, to be honest. I gave Rob Font the first. I gave Chito the second, third, fourth, and fifth. I thought he had many moments in that fight to end the fight. I thought he hurt Rob multiple times in each of those rounds. Severely hurt him. Obviously hurt him. Where Rob Font, he had a good couple rounds and his work rate was really high and he kept pushing forward and he threw some, he kept mixing him up, but none of them seemed to faze Chito at all. So that's why I got Chito in that fight. What's next for Chito? I don't know, man. You would assume that he'd move up into the top 5. Let me see if he actually did. That's probably what I should do, is see if the rankings, I forget what days the rankings come out. I thought it was the Mondays leading up, but I could be completely wrong. So we'll take a look at the rankings and see if they've changed anything, and if Chito did move up in the rankings, and if he did, where he's at now. But we got to see what's next for him, because it's going to be, so they haven't updated it. Still got Rob Font at 5, where Chito was at 8. I'm assuming that Chito's going to jump. Maybe he jumps up ahead of Font, and we'll see what's next for him, man. A Corey Sandhagen fight, I think, would be pretty good. Jose Aldo, it would be a rematch. We saw Aldo beat him 2 fights ago, right? I think he was Aldo, then Davey Grant. Now, I could be wrong. Maybe it was Davey Grant, then he lost to Aldo, and then he fought Rob Font. I don't know. I'm not 100% sure on that. Don't quote me, but Aldo rematch could work, but I don't see Aldo taking on that rematch after he just beat both Rob Font and these guys. Aldo's still a guy where you got to do something with him. Maybe him and Sandhagen, and if that's the case, maybe you take on a Dominic Cruz, right? Dominic Cruz has been a guy that's like, I'm not taking people behind me. All right, if that moved Chito into a top 5 situation, maybe you take on Dominic Cruz because he's a big name, and you may look at Chito and say, hey, maybe a Song Yadong rematch, right? This is a fight that you want to get back because you felt like you got robbed, you felt like you won that fight, and they gave it to Song Yadong. Maybe do that rematch. Because anybody that moves into the top 5, it's going to be hard to force them then to fight somebody outside of the top 5. But like Uncle Chael says, rankings shouldn't matter. What's the name? What's the draw? What's the recognition? What place are you on the card? So if you get another Fight Night main event against Dominic Cruz, who cares if he's at 7 and you're at 5? Who cares? You take that fight. If you're Chito, you take it. Unless you can get a Corey Sandhagen. Unless you can get your Jose Aldo rematch. So if you can get those fights, you take them. But Dominic Cruz makes a lot of sense for Chito if Dominic Cruz is down. Marab makes a lot of sense as well. So a lot of options, man. Rematches with Yadong, rematches with Aldo would make sense. Cruz, Marab, Corey Sandhagen all make sense. It's wide open for Chito. You got to imagine that Chito now is 1, maybe 2 wins away from title contention. He's right there. So we got to see what goes on with him. I know everyone's already, Sean O'Malley rematch. It doesn't make sense right now for Chito. It doesn't make sense for him. That's one that it just doesn't make sense. Because if you beat him, everybody is still talking about Sean O'Malley being a can crusher. So if you beat him, you beat the number 13 ranked guy that you've already beat before. So does that push you into a title fight? It might push you more into recognition. It might push you more support. Might give you more fan base because it did already when you beat him the first time, but it just doesn't make sense to me. Chito's now at a position after this fight with Rob to say, hey, Sean's got to catch me now, right? I had to catch Sean. I caught him. Now he has to catch up to me. And that's a pretty good position for Chito. So that Sean O'Malley rematch doesn't make any sense to me. Makes a lot of sense to me right now for Sean. If I could fight a top 5 guy and I'm truly convinced that I could beat him, how quickly does the UFC? The only problem with that, and the other reason, is if the UFC is doing this, what we've been saying, this slow cook, this slow process for Sean, and we really want to build him up, and we want to make him look like an absolute killer, and we want to slowly progress him there because everyone says Dana White and the UFC wants him to be the champion. I don't know if I really don't know if Dana cares. I really don't. I think he wants him to be prolonged because he wants to make money off of him, but I don't think he cares if he's champion. He's making money off of Jorge Masvidal. Jorge Masvidal, his fights against Kamaru Usman showed you that he can't be champion. His fight against Colby showed you that just can't be. Jorge can't get past those guys. Not to say never, but at this age and stuff, it's very hard to imagine Jorge ever being a champion. They just paid him. He's the next biggest, highest paid athlete next to Conor McGregor. Who's the third? Nate? These are 3 guys that it's very impossible to see a way any of those guys can become a champion. And they're the 3 highest paid. I don't think the UFC cares who the champion is. They just need you to be marketable. In order for O'Malley to continue to be marketable, they have to give him winnable fights, or fights that at least make sense, and fights that don't propel him into a championship fight right away. So I think they're going to take their time with Sean O'Malley. Maybe a Pedro. Ricky Simone's still there, and that's one of those situations where if Sean O'Malley were to get Simone, then I think it's very clear that the UFC does not give a shit about where Sean O'Malley goes. Right? They're not trying to force him into a championship fight because Simone's one of those guys where I think you look at him, I think you look at Marab, because Sean O'Malley's takedown defense and grappling skills are still such a question. Those two guys would be kind of the biggest question marks for a Sean O'Malley inside of the top 15 because they're just such good wrestlers. And everyone's whole entire thing with the UFC is they're not going to give him a wrestler, they're not going to give him a wrestler because they don't want to do that to him. So we'll see if they give him one of those guys, then clearly the UFC doesn't give a shit about any of that. So we'll see where O'Malley goes. But again, for Chito, I don't think that O'Malley makes sense at all for him right now. If I'm on his team, I'm like, look, we're taking Sandhagen, we're taking Jose, we're taking Marab, we're taking Cruz. Maybe we take a Song Yadong rematch. Those are 5 options. If I can pick mine, I'm going to go Corey. That's where I'm going to go if I can pick mine, Corey or Aldo. Man, honestly, Aldo doesn't even... I don't know if I would want Dominic Cruz over one of those guys. Because Cruz is just such a big name, man. And Cruz is just one of those guys that brings so much recognition. Former champion. All of those good things. Aldo is too. And Sandhagen's just such a tough guy to deal with. I might say Aldo, then Cruz, then Sandhagen if I could put them in order of the fights that we want. But those 3 would be my 3 if I'm going to the UFC, if I'm representing Chito. Hey, these are 3 guys that we really, really want. Please help us get one of them. And let's see how that is moving forward. And then there's a guy, that everyone just continues to talk about in Henry Cejudo that wants to come back, wants to, he's on the testing pool. He's at the very minimum, he's 6 months away from being able to fight. So I'm not even going to talk about him. It is what it is, but that's going to be a wrap for today. UFC 274, I know we didn't talk about that. Again, just because it's Monday doesn't mean I won't talk about UFC 274 moving forward. So you can expect that talk, big time pay-per-view. You can expect that on Friday. I'll be able to talk about it then, the Friday leading up to the actual pay-per-view. What are they called? I forget the actual name of the YouTube channel, like the videos. Why am I having a difficulty remembering like what their actual names are of them? But that's coming up. That's already been out. I think episode 1 has been out already. And it was pretty good. You should go ahead and give it a watch. Well, the countdowns, okay. I got, for some reason, I thought they were called something else. It's just UFC 234 countdowns. Those videos are already out. The full episode's out. They did the Oliveira and Gaethje. They did the Chandler and Ferguson. So those are already out, man. Go watch those if you haven't already to get yourself hyped up, to get yourselves excited for UFC 274. I don't know why people are saying that this is a terrible pay-per-view. Dude, give me Rose, give me Gaethje and Oliveira for a title fight. You're giving me Chandler and Ferguson, like... Weak pay-per-view where? If you think this is a weak pay-per-view, you're just not that into the UFC. And, it is what it is. If you think it's weak, it is. But I'm really excited, especially Charles Oliveira being one of my favorite UFC fighters on the roster. He's one of my absolute favorites. I love Charles Oliveira. And Rose is probably my favorite. No, not probably. Rose is my favorite female fighter on the roster as well. So when those two people are in, I'm in. I can't wait for UFC 274. I will talk about that, breakdown, scenarios, all that stuff on Friday. So thank you guys as always. Episode 52 is a wrap. I will see you guys on 2 days on Wednesday. Peace.